Hello and welcome to the day one AMA for the Tech Accelerator, Copilot for Microsoft 365. I'm Jeremy Chapman. I'm joined by three other experts, Karuana, Josh, and Angela. And this 25 minutes is all about answering your questions, anything that you have for Copilot for Microsoft 365. So let's go ahead and get started. So we have a question already that's come in from LinkedIn asking, what type of success measures should I use to gauge the benefit and impact of giving users Copilot? And I'll give that to Karuana.
Thanks so much, Jeremy. Happy to be here and answer everyone's questions. Success measures are so important, and they're going to differ for each organization. One of the things that I recommend is you go out to adoption.microsoft.com/Copilot, click on Adoption Manager on that page, and grab our Persona Kit. That Persona Kit is going to give you some example scenarios where you can drive for improvement. And I'm happy to announce that we're expanding that to a full scenario library as we march towards this March 6th launch for all of our new content. You can think about things like saving time and creating RFPs, being able to process more customer inquiries. It really depends on the department that you are actually enabling. So take a look at your usage, make sure people are actually using the solution, but then marry it to the business outcomes that are going to drive growth for your company. That's really where you want to be thinking. Lots more to share on that, but I know we have more questions.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that and the Copilot dashboard and all the iterations there. So another question coming in from the tech community: is hallucination check implemented on Copilot for Microsoft 365? If so, how much does it eliminate the possibilities for hallucination? Anyone have an answer? I think I can probably answer that somewhat myself, but there are some things in place in order to disable hallucination. I'll take the first part maybe. In terms of first, there's content filtering in terms of prompts going in to the Copilot process and orchestration. Then once you get into the once you determine the intent of the prompt, it's going through additional orchestration that's looking for grounding information, which can be from the internet if it's enabled. It can be from the Microsoft Graph if you've got plugins or graph connectors. Those areas will provide an additional context and information to prevent it from hallucinating or making things up effectively. And that way, when it's got that additional context, it can respond to you. And then as the prompt is kind of returned back to you as a completion, it will go through another set of filters as well to make sure that the response itself has the right filtering in place before it's presented back. Anybody want to add anything there?
I can add on. I say we really err on the side of data governance and thinking about what is appropriate to share and who to share that with. And that's a constant evaluation and checks that we have with each call. And so I think that, Microsoft runs on trust is something we take very seriously, and you can take that to heart when you're using our AI tools as well as any of our other tools.
And one other thing I'd add in too, Jeremy and Angela, is always keep the feedback coming in. So as you may see potential hallucinations, give us that feedback. Use the thumbs up and thumbs down in that scenario to tell us what's wrong in that response that came in. Feedback is key for us to keep driving and improving these products.
Great point. So another question's coming in from Chris. As a Teams admin, is there a way that I can set up a policy to automatically record and transcribe all the meetings? I know that you can allow and disallow transcription, but I want to default it on at all times so that users don't have to remember to set it up or hit the transcribe kind of button when they schedule the meeting or manually start it during the meeting. Any thoughts there? Maybe Josh or Karuana?
Go ahead, Josh. Do you want to take that? Go ahead.
So I think, is there a feature in Teams Premium to enable a meeting policy for that? I'm not sure on that one, if you can actually.
Well, there's not necessarily, but I'm going to take it from a different perspective. I would survey your users if they actually want you to do that before you do. I actually think that that's probably not a great idea. Now, it depends on the size of your organization and your existing culture with regard to meeting recordings. But one of the things about meeting recordings is when you set any meeting up to auto record at its start, it gets all that early conversation, that moment of social cohesion and bonding that most good meetings have, that not everyone wants to be recorded. Now, I realize that creates an issue where, maybe someone forgets to turn it on. But I think it's really important for people to feel like they have control over when they're being recorded and when they aren't. This goes back to running on trust, building trust with your user community. So while you probably could maybe do that, I would highly recommend against it, actually.
And just to be clear, so I'll chime in a little bit. In the Teams Admin Center under meeting policies, there are recording and transcription policies that you can set. One of them is to allow basically the owner of the meeting to turn on. And then if it's on with transcript, as Karuana describes, that means that at that point, if you enter a meeting late, you can do the recap me, what happened has happened until now. And also later, the recap from the owner, anyone who has access to that meeting information can do a recap. There's also the on kind of by default setting, which the owner, to Karuana's point, isn't in control of turning it on and off. It's just on, but it's also got some limitations there. So I would recommend checking out. There's some help guidance, and I linked to it in the session 2 of today, where you can find the information about on and on with transcript to learn more about what those different policy settings do.
And it's worth pointing out that also the meeting templates will assist with that. If you're using meeting templates, and that gives the people control over the experience that they're having, but gives you as an organization a higher rate of quality when it comes to having certain settings configured before a meeting. I'm a big fan of meeting templates, so I definitely encourage folks to use them.
Okay, another question that's coming in from Nicole. Security question regarding the web content plugin message. So Copilot may share some of your Microsoft 365 enterprise data if plugins have been turned on. Does that mean that our prompts or enterprise data may be leaving our enterprise or may be used to train the web model?
I can answer that question. Okay. When you're thinking about this experience, think about how the plugins work in your app experience independent of the Copilot tools. And that's the experience you're going to have with Copilot. So for example, if you have allowed that plugin to have access in your enterprise for just day-to-day operations in an application like Teams or Word, that's going to be the experience that gets carried through to Copilot. Now, we're always going to be grounded in zero trust model. And so we're thinking about least privilege access. And so those checks are occurring at each hop in the code. And so you can just trust that, we're carrying that decision you made pre-Copilot into your Copilot experience.
Yeah, and the way to think about it too is, plugins let you do read and write, whereas like graph connectors will basically apply additional indexing information to the Microsoft Graph. So if you're setting up your plugins, whether they're Teams plugins or Copilot plugins, you're sending information back. For example, as we've shown in other past demos where we're maybe setting a completion of a ticket in a ticketing system, that information has to return back to that system to write that your ticket has been resolved. So those types of things are going to be based on what the plugin is allowed to do. And conversely, you can also have plugins that only perform read functions and don't write back. Therefore, there would be no data sent the other way back into that data source. So just a thank you for everyone who's submitting questions. There's a lot coming in through the tech community. And we got a question from Jack here about Copilot for small business, not Copilot for Microsoft 365. Is there an action to be taken then for Copilot, what used to be called Bing Chat for Enterprise for small businesses, to get the data protection for browsing and using Copilot? Is commercial data protection turned on by default? Who would like to take that?
I can take that one. So if you're logging in through the browser with your Enter ID, commercial data protection is turned on in the small business experience. So that's an extension. We actually announced that, I want to say in early February, maybe end of January, there was a specific announcement about it, which you can find on the adoption.microsoft.com hub. So that data protection is extended in SMB licensing.
Yeah, and there are
you
some
have
controls.
to log in to get it, though. I just want to make that clear. If you don't log in, it's not there. So that login is very important in the browser experience, so it knows who you are and can therefore extend the protection.
Right, and just to point out on the Copilot page, I answered a question earlier on one of my 2 sessions, or maybe it was on Josh's, but someone asked a question for this earlier, and there are controls to basically control DNS traffic if you want to block sign into personal, like using an MSA account, Microsoft personal account. So you can actually control that through basically DNS config mechanisms on managed devices. Of course, on an unmanaged device where you've got no, no way of knowing what that user's logging into, they would be able to log in with a personal account because that device wouldn't connect to your resources if it's set up to where only managed devices can connect to your resources. So you can basically put controls in place that will mandate effectively that they are using the Entra ID or the work account to sign in, therefore getting the commercial data protections running in those cases where they're using Microsoft Copilot, the web experience effectively. Another question.
Jeremy,
Yes?
can I just say one other thing? It's worth mentioning that all of the enterprise guidance that we're giving you, we're also refactoring for SMB, and it will launch the following week after our March 6th launch. And so simplifying this for SMB so that you can take advantage of the good governance practices that exist for Microsoft 365 without some of the complexity that you see in large global multinationals is something we're very much focused on. So stay tuned. We'll make sure that this can be simplified and implemented in your organization.
Okay, good point. And a question from Francesca on Tech Community. When can we expect Copilot to be available for the semi-annual channel? For the Microsoft 365 apps for enterprise, you can use the current channel preview and monthly enterprise channel. There are currently no plans in place to have it available in the semi-annual channel as part of the update path. So you're going to want to be on one of those three options of current preview or monthly enterprise. And we also covered a few ways that you can do that. One of the probably the easiest ways is using policy, which anything that runs ADMX-backed policies for Office 2016 and later can do the channel upgrade for you with just a policy check-in and enforcement effectively. Or you can use the Office deployment tool and basically rerun, click to run setup against those settings that you configure. So there are a couple of options there. The policy one, though, in my mind, having done Windows and application deployments for many years of my life, would be the policy option to do that because it's a fairly easy one to set, scope to the right users, and then it's just the next time that device checks in, it will get the basically the policy to upgrade its channel of Office.
And Jeremy, that whole model too is a great way for us to get our user enablement champions to see those latest features and help the organization see where that'll impact them most in like current channel, and then expands a monthly enterprise channel maybe for the rest of the organization. But a great way to think about, hey, how do I bring in my user enablement specialist, my champions in my organization to see features sooner, and then translate that to how we're going to roll that out and impact the business going forward.
Yep, great points.
I'm really missing on-screen emojis. That I should give a little applause there for that answer. Thank you, Josh. Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to the next question from Esbjorn. Hopefully I'm enunciating that correctly. Curious if Copilot will be added to Microsoft 365's maturity model, as I love using that framework together with MOCA to bring the C-level discussion to the necessary higher level. It looks like Karuana, you want to answer that one. I see nodding.
I am nodding. I love the Microsoft 365 maturity model, as well as the modern collaboration architecture, MOCA, which he's referring to. Both of those frameworks will be updated with the learnings and the conversations that you need to have over the coming months. Right now, we're focused on the first round of the new Copilot implementation framework, which will then, of course, update the user enablement tools in Kit. But you're talking about the leadership journey, the AI council, being able to have those C-suite conversations, and especially talking about gaining value in that cross-organizational scenario implementation. You're going to see all of that coming from the broad team over the coming months. So yes.
Great answer. Thank you for that. And we got another question from Walter on the tech community. Is there a way to view user Copilot prompts in the audit section of Purview? In the demo you showed, there was no user prompt, just the docs accessed and the labels that were applied. I can probably answer part of that. But yes, so in the audit logs for basically what happens with the prompt messaging, it's stored like Teams messaging effectively, in that it goes through a mess, and it actually stores those messages in Exchange Online effectively like email messages. and you can filter them by the interaction types, whether that's Copilot. It's called Copilot in BizChat. It's one of those things where the previous name will continue to remain, like in scripting, but you can actually filter based on those events, and you will see the user prompt and the response for that in those cases where you want to actually look at the kind of chat back and forth, prompt and completion turns for those different sessions. So yes, it's in the audit logs. Anyone want to add to that? Okay, so then we'll move on. We'll move on to question from Brian, Tech Community. And likely many others, is Copilot available in GCC? Who can take that?
So I can take it, not yet, but the teams are working to bring that functionality into GCC. So keep looking at the roadmap, aka.mswac M365 Copilot roadmap for more information.
And just if everyone, I don't know if everyone knows what GCC is, but that's kind of the government cloud option for folks that are in government circles and yet use that offer. So if you're watching, don't know what GCC is, that's what that's all about. So question coming in from Ricardo about licensing for enterprises: is Copilot licensing available only as an add-on to Microsoft 365 licensing? It is as it is for Copilot Pro for home users. Can we expect to see in some near future that Copilot would be a feature of the Microsoft 365 E3 license? And I can probably take some of that, but does anyone, before I go, anyone have an answer there for it? Or
I sort of have an answer. Why don't you go, Jeremy, and I'll add on.
Okay, so actually, it's very apropos because we just published a Microsoft Mechanics episode on that on Monday with Mary Pash presenting the different experiences. So basically, there's a Copilot experience for everyone, I would say. You can go all the way from unauthenticated personal experiences through copilot.microsoft.com, or if you sign in, you can sign in with a personal account, a Microsoft account like Hotmail or Outlook.com, where you can use Copilot. And when you sign in, you get your session history and other capabilities, plugins, et cetera, that will light up. Then if you do Copilot Pro, that's also against a Microsoft personal account like Hotmail or Outlook again. And that gives you kind of the Office apps integration, priority access to GPT-4 and GPT-4 Turbo models, the better image creation with landscape modes, et cetera. So that gives you that. Then when you go to work experiences, that's when we talked about earlier, the commercial data protections can come in when you log in with your work account or your Entra ID that you use to access Microsoft 365 work services. And then Copilot for Microsoft 365 is an add-on to Office 365 and Microsoft 365 packages or suites that you can apply. We don't have any answers in terms of what the future of that beholds, but right now it's basically an add-on that you add on top of Office 365 E3, E5, Microsoft 365 E3, E5 for those different experiences. So there are free things that you can do with both work and personal accounts. The work account is the commercial data protections variant that's included with most Office and Microsoft 365 subscriptions. But for the Copilot for Microsoft 365 kind of flagship experience, that is an add-on for those different license types.
And there's also some wisdom in having that SKU structure in place, also from a user enablement perspective, right? You're going to go big and take large cohorts of people to get the most value. You want to take a large cohort of people and onboard them. But as people change in your organization, as roles evolve, you may have some folks who don't need Copilot until later. You can manage your investment in that way. Of course, in a perfect world, everyone has access to Copilot. But as Jeremy was just saying, there's a progression of experiences that may work for certain frontline workers or other folks. So you want to think of that from an investment perspective as well. You can never speak to what the future of Microsoft SKUs hold, but I think that between the technical implementation, the user enablement, and the business strategy, it seems like we can rely on this for some time in the future.
Right. So we've got another question that's coming from Keen on the Tech Community regarding the onboarding email template. Currently, It is only available in English. Similarly, the templates are writing effective prompts they're also only available primarily in English. Are there any changes to plans coming, I guess, there in terms of opening up additional languages?
Absolutely, there are. We have 9 primary languages that we're working to translate that content into. We really wanted to get first what we viewed as the preview content drop, in these early days of the Copilot services. Now that we're moving towards this March 6th date, we'll launch this new content, which will also be English only, and then proceed to go down the localization route. A good deal of our content also will be available on web pages, which will auto-translate, but you're specifically referring to the downloadable content. So that's absolutely in plan for us to evolve that into the core 9 supported languages.
Great answer. So from L. Brandt 1234 on the tech community, is there guidance available on forming an AI council, maybe a center of excellence type organization? That's probably
Yes, as a matter of fact, there is. I just finished writing a white paper on that to give you some guidance around it. And there's some fantastic insights that have come from the much broader team, from customers who've actually formed AI councils in their organization. So that will be part of that March 6th drop that I'm referring to. It's really important to have a diverse group of people with a clear vision and goals. And objectives when it comes to risk identification, mitigation, identifying opportunities, continuing to lead the messaging. It's in some ways an extension of your sponsorship model for your overall AI implementation. But there is a detailed guidance that you'll see on March 6th on that very topic.
Awesome. So from Mark, what is the default permission setting for organizational data? Do we have to set permissions on all of our data manually? Anyone want to take that?
Well, that really speaks to the overall governance hygiene of your Microsoft 365 tenant. And so as you think about your broad use of SharePoint, of OneDrive, of things like Forms and other services across Microsoft 365, for a good long time, we've been talking about what we call teamwork governance. And there's some fundamentals to configuring teamwork governance, whether it comes to the automation and archiving of teams, the setting of default permissions, guest access policy. There's a bit of a checklist involved in that core governance work, which is also a part of your Copilot implementation readiness. We have an optimization assessment that you take as an organization to figure out where you're at with that governance maturity. It's certainly something that I have always viewed as separate from whatever services you're managing. Now we're talking about AI. Before I was talking about Teams, and we talked about moving SharePoint to the cloud. All along, we've needed to do this tenant governance work. And so that optimization assessment will help you understand where your tenant is at. And if you need assistance with that and you're greater than 150 seats, the fast track team can assist you with that as a part of your Copilot implementation. So you're not in that alone. But what that will do is that will raise all boats across your Microsoft 365 tenant. It'll help your teams in SharePoint implementations, along with ensuring data security is appropriate for your Copilot implementation.
Yeah, and one thing I add to that too is in terms of working through, and we showed kind of in the first 2 sessions the site list approach and going through your active sites. It depends on the size of your organization, but you're going to want to prioritize the most important ones containing maybe the most highly valued data first. Like if you've got an organization with hundreds or thousands of sites, you'll want to work through the high priority sites first, and then it's kind of like maybe a 90-10 type rule where you're going to be able to limit access and make sure that you've got the right access controls around the 90% potentially of the highest value assets that you have in your organization. And then the other thing I'd point out is through search now, like the permissions and access management, it doesn't really change things with Copilot. If someone wants to go into SharePoint and search for a file or go into Microsoft365.com and search, they will find the files that they have access to. So Copilot doesn't give you any additional rights or show any additional files that you wouldn't be able to access. But this is one of the things that we do hear a lot in terms of, yes, you should do some work in terms of making sure that you're in the right state from an access management perspective of the different files, especially the ones that you want to protect. And there are ways also to automate some of this with purview controls where document classification can happen automatically. then based on classification, you can lock down basically the sharing radius of those documents that contain sensitive information or have or trainable classifier detected documents that are certain document types. So there are some things that you can do to automate a lot of this workflow too as part of Purview. And I'll move on though to the next question. So looks like from Sean, is premium Purview, so that's kind of apropos, licensing required for compliance features of Microsoft 365 Copilot or Copilot for Microsoft 365? And this might be something that Angela can answer that's close to your session, it looks like, coming up. So do you want to take that one?
Sure. So it depends on which features. When you say premium Purview features, I think it's important to get specific about which features you're looking for and making sure that the license you have matches your business needs. And so I would start there. But typically, yes, you're going to need that data classification capabilities through Purview integrated with your Microsoft 365 tools to get the full value of what we can bring to the table with our Copilot experiences.
Awesome. So from Tom, let me read the link on the screen though first. So aka.ms/accelerate/copilot for SMBs to get more information. And from Tom, are there any plans on voice enabling Copilot?
Oh, I don't think we're done with the way that the natural language interface is going to continue to evolve over the coming year. None of us can speak to specific plans that aren't already published on the roadmap, but just think about the innovation that you've already seen coming from Microsoft and OpenAI and through our Azure OpenAI services, and put your creativity hat on. Think about what might come next, and we'll see if we can match your creativity.
It is moving quickly, and actually last September, we published the mechanics on how you can use Azure AI effectively to do fully automated call center type workloads where it's basically doing speech to text conversion on both sides for incoming calls and then looking up data through a backend and then responding through voice. So the technology does exist, and you can start building apps using that technology with Azure Communication Services today along with Azure AI Tech. So a lot of that is there. So it's exciting stuff. And like Karuana said, we keep adding more and more capability almost every day to the Copilot experience. So I'll have one more question here. It looks like from Chris on the tech community. When documents are indexed in Graph, are they indexed as whole documents, or are they pre-processed as they might be in a prompt flow implementation? And I know that reg scenarios work best with smaller topic-centric documents, but is there something else that we should be doing to make sure that this data is properly surfaced? Who wants to take that one?
That is a great, so I'm going to take that from a scenario perspective. That is a great scenario to think about. Some of the additional features that we've previously announced with regard to SharePoint capabilities and the content AI services that we have. We see this in insurance companies and organizations that have very specific documents and need to do document processing, but then want to apply contextual AI capabilities to that large set of documents. So it might be large or small. It depends on the size of your organization. I would absolutely suggest that you follow us in the SharePoint community where we're talking about those ongoing content AI capabilities. And of course, Microsoft 365 conference is coming at the end of April, where all of the AI experts and myself and others, folks on this call will be, and we'll be doing deep dive technical presentations at that conference on services just like that. So it is a fast moving space in terms of the capabilities we have. And there's two tiers to that as well in terms of what can you do out of the box with our services, what requires a premium license, what is low code, and then what is core extensibility scenarios that you'd need to invest in. So you want to match your level of investment to your level of business needs, so you don't over-invest in making something too complicated, where you could get most of your scenario met by services that we're already creating out of the box or with the premium license. So that's just core technology strategy, from a CIO perspective. But you'll hear a lot more about that as we get ready for the Microsoft 365 Community Conference at the end of April in Orlando, Florida. Maybe we'll get to see you there.
Yes, coming up very soon. So thank you so much, Karuana, Josh, and Angela, for joining today. And also thank you, everyone, for submitting your different questions in the tech community. We're going to wrap up for now, but we've got a lot more coming up in the rest of the Tech Accelerator. You're going to want to join us through Friday in terms of any questions that you have. And also make sure that you can see the rest of the great Copilot experiences and demonstrations tomorrow, and join the conversations at aka.ms/accelerate Copilot, and we'll see you there.
Thanks, everyone.